Hi guys, I'm Kristen. Welcome and welcome back to my channel. Now that we have gotten all of the mid-year book freakout tags out of the way, there are a few books that I just don't want to hear mentioned at all again for the rest of the year. I noticed a huge trend with the mid-year book freakout tags that were going on or have been coming out from most people's channels for the past month essentially, and that is that there are some books that have just been so over discussed and hyped and talked about, and I'm sure that that is the case every year, but for whatever reason this first half of this year I'm really feeling that. And maybe it's because there hasn't been, or it hasn't felt like there's been a ton of variety in my own reading. But for whatever reason, I just cannot stand to hear certain books mentioned anymore this year. So I asked over on my community tab, what are the books that you think have been the most hyped and discussed or talked about this year? And I thought I would go through the answers, react to them, and then also spend a little bit of extra time talking about the ones that I personally agree with. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. Yes, this was one that I had for sure. And I read this book. I liked it. I talked about it in my mid-year book freakout tag as both my crush of being Wendell Bambleby and most beautiful book that I have read, because I don't buy books, but read this year. I think outside of the the book freakout tags that were coming out, I don't really feel like I heard that much about it in the second quarter of the year, but for the first 3 months of this year, everyone was talking about this book. Everyone was reading this book. Everyone was talking about it. But I know people who read it twice in the first 3 months of this year for certain obligations. Not naming names. You know who you are. I really enjoyed this book. But it was so talked about. And I even only feel like I read it when I did because everyone was talking about it. And I was like, well, I have to find out what this is about. I definitely got sucked into picking it up for the hype, for the reasons, because everyone was talking about it. But at the same time, I don't think it's gonna have a lasting popularity. Maybe I'm wrong, because I do think people are tired of sexy fae, and I feel like we're gonna see the trickster, real folklore versions of fae a lot more. At least I hope that that's where we're going with this. Then we have Day of Fallen Night, and it actually took me a minute to remember what this book was, because I'm very visual. But this was the new Samantha Shannon book, the prequel book for Priory of the Orange Tree, and I would agree with this one as well. I don't have as strong feelings about this one, other than to say that this is a good example too of one where it's not just the hype in the moment when the book comes out. There's some books that are so anticipated, it feels like you're hearing about them forever, because everyone's talking about them in the months leading up to when this comes out, whether it's in the a monthly anticipated release, and then you watch 7 different channels monthly anticipated releases to see what's new this month, and everyone mentioned this book, so you hear about it that many times over and over, and then you see the reactions of people reading it, the good, the bad, etc. There's a single review, it's in a wrap-up. So I agree that this one was talked about a lot. I think maybe not quite as much after the fact. I think that there was a shorter span in which it was discussed. But yes, would agree as well. Okay, then we have The Adventures of Amina al-Sarfi, and yes, 100% agree with this. Because, again, this is the same anticipated thing, and I think that this came out at basically the same time as Day of Fallen Night. So those two were really linked, because they had predecessor books that were fairly popular in that Priory of the Orange Tree. I think had a pretty big, it was pretty hyped when it originally came out. It didn't work for everyone, but it was pretty hyped and discussed. And then also with the David Bad series. So this was big follow-up books to those things from these authors, and they were so talked about beforehand. The amount of people that were anticipating The Adventures of Amina al-Sarfi, myself included, and then I never even picked it up because the immediate response was so shocked, maybe is the right way to say that, where people were oh, wait a second, this isn't just David Bod but with pirates now. It's something in a very different feel and humor and tone and whatever. And so then you had to go through, so there was like a very different reaction response where the anticipation was the same, and then you had this reaction response of people being like either really, really loving it or being like, nope, not what I wanted, that was not it. And can I just say that, like, I'm happy that the authors are getting this hype. Like, I'm not frowning upon these books being popular and discussed. I am so happy that these authors have the amount of success that they have, that a lot of people are talking about their books and a lot of people are enjoying them, etc. It's great for them. That's great. I'm just done. New half of the year, turn over a new leaf. Let's hear some new books talked about, you know? Mysteries of Thorn Manor. That one is not ringing a bell. Oh, the Margaret Rogerson novella. I actually didn't hear. I was surprised that I didn't hear more about that. I heard about that after the fact by like one channel, and then like I heard somebody else recently bring it up. I was really surprised because like, oh, there was another Sorcery of Thorns thing. But that being said, I don't follow a ton of accounts that read a ton of YA fantasy anymore, so perhaps that's probably why I missed it. So I can't say that I was in on the hype for that one, or that I was affected by the hype. I was shocked that I didn't hear more about it. Song of Silver Flame Like Night. I did hear about this one quite a bit, but I feel like for like a very succinct period of time, like a very short period right before and right after it came out. I don't feel like it had like the longevity of discussion over and over and over again for the past 6 months in the way that some of these other ones have. God Killer, I would say the same thing, although I did see it crop up in quite a few surprises, favorite of the year, favorite character, or whatever. It was definitely in quite a few mid-year tags that I saw. But I would say that there was like a period of time around when it came out where everyone was talking about it. And this is one of the books that I actually would like to still read from the first half of the year that I haven't gotten to. The Book That Wouldn't Burn. Yes, agreed. Now, that being said, I'm currently reading this book. And this one is interesting too, because I feel like it came out in what, June? Maybe May? I think May. So didn't hear about it as, like, it's not like we've been hearing about it over and over again since January, but there are certain books, because of the author, because of marketing, for whatever reason, get that pre-anticipation hype in ways that other books don't. And so then you're hearing everyone talking about it. This is going to get a little bit repetitive, but I'm realizing you can only say so much. But yes, I would agree that this one had quite a bit of hype. Although I haven't heard that many people like actually reacting to the book or like the responses. I haven't seen that many reviews. So I feel like that one's like a medium, a moderate amount of overhype. Yellowface, check. Agreed. Very talked about. I get why, for sure. Is R.F. Guang. It's something that they're doing totally different from everything else. I've heard it is a very intriguing book, like in that it's just like wild and wildly different, totally different genre even than their other stuff. But yes, yeah, Yellowface for sure. The Crowns of Nyaxia series. Yes, thank you someone for putting this. This is the, I can't even with the title of this book, The Serpent and the Wings of Night, The Serpent and the Wings Like Night, whatever it is. And this is one that I don't understand the hype, because I personally DNF'd this book. But it's you know what, fantasy romance is having a moment, and this is one of the breakthrough fantasy romance books, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of fantasy romance on like Kindle Unlimited, let's say, but I just feel like there's like a plethora of romantasy, as it were, I guess is the preferred or the more common term at the moment. But The Serpent and the Wings of Night, or whatever it's called, has just been talked about by so many people, read by so many people. I didn't hear anybody anticipate it, so it's not like it falls into that category. It's just more like everyone reading and reacting to that and being like, oh my god, you have to read this and this and this book. And you know what? It is by far not my favorite romantasy book, but I'm glad that it's working for people. I personally don't get it, but I'm glad that people have found it. But yeah, 100% that book has been overhyped. Another exact same one, which like, I mean, I feel like everyone like commented this, and that is like obviously Fourth Wing as well. Same thing. Although this one, I would say had like less pre-hype, although I did see it mentioned on people's anticipated releases because it sounded like a really cool new fantasy book. So I think people like just thought like, oh cool, a dragon riding school book. That sounds like a badass military fantasy book to read. And then you had like the crazy reactions to it with just like that crazy Goodreads rating, all of the hype, and then the people being like, wait, what? Like, why is everyone loving this? And you know what? I'm pretty sure the sequel's coming out this fall. And so we're gonna get it all over again. That's kind of disappointing. I find that personally disappointing that we're gonna have to listen to more Fourth Wing chatter. Like, just it's just a fact that it's going to be talked about for the rest of this year because the sequel's already coming out. I didn't even hate it. I didn't even hate it, and I'm like upset that there's going to be that much hype for this book the rest of the year. Untethered Sky is an interesting one because I feel like it had all of the anticipation discussion and none of the response, which is one of those cases, and this happens to like a few books every year where everyone's talking about them in their anticipated releases for whatever reason, whether it's like the author or just like really great marketing, and then when they come out, crickets. Like just crickets. That being said, I did hear people talking about this afterwards, but very minimally. So I don't think it was either like a huge win or a huge fail. I feel like it's just like a little bit meh, maybe. This is a really interesting one because it's like so much anticipation and then like very muted responses in the amount, let's say, and breadth of discussion, the time that people are spending talking about that book compared to how anticipated it was, I think is very telling. Okay, only a couple more. I totally agree. I'm going to save the one that I have the strongest of feelings about. Maybe not the strongest feelings. I'm going to save like another hot button one for last. But the other one is Divine Rivals, which, yeah, I totally agree with, especially for, I'm forgetting the name of the author, Rebecca Ross? I don't know. This book came out of nowhere. But this one I think is a quiet hype. I heard less anticipation for it, but I have heard a surprising number of people talk about it after the fact for how little I heard about it beforehand. So I probably would have mentioned it just because I'm like, where did this book come from? Like, I didn't hear any hype about it beforehand, and then like I heard a bunch of people talking about it. But yeah, again, I put this in like the medium to moderate, over talked about kind of a book. But maybe that's again because it is YA and because I'm not necessarily following a ton of channels that have a large proportion of YA books that they're reading. Last one, which is honestly the book that had inspired me to do this video, and that's Tress of the Emerald Sea. Like, I just don't care. I just don't care. I am really glad that people are loving it. I'm glad that at least one of the secret projects, I know that the third one has come out now, and I haven't gone out of my way to hear anything about it. So I haven't heard a ton of chatter about the third project, and I know the second project like didn't really work for a lot of people. So I'm glad that one of these secret projects, for how much people paid to get like special editions and whatever in the Kickstarter, I'm glad that at least one of them is really working for people, but I just don't care. And that is like, sounds really mean, but I just cannot hear about this book anymore this year. Like, please talk about anything else. I'm not a Brandon Sanderson hater. Like, I think he writes really fine books. Again, I'm not, please don't come at me, but it's not even like I obviously haven't read it. And again, glad that people liked it, but just stop talking about it. I just don't want to hear anymore about this whimsical boat book on this really cool, like, it does sound cool. It does sound cool. It sounds cool. It sounds cute. The whole flipped, what's that, Princess Bride kind of a thing, like cute. It sounds really cute. I'm glad people are having a good time. I can't say that enough. We could put a tally up of how many times I've said that and kept it in and not edited it out. But I just, for how often we had to hear about it talked about in the first half of the year, and then also the people who like didn't read it right away, so then you like kept hearing about it, and then with like the mid-year whatever, and it was either people's favorite or people's most anticipated or whatever, or it was the most beautiful book they bought this year. Thank you. Next. Is that still a thing? I don't think it is. But anyway, that's how I feel about that. So over-talked about and overhyped and discussed from the first half of this year. Or at least that's how I feel. Let me know what you think about my thoughts. Were any of these like spicy hot takes? I feel bad. I feel like this is maybe the spiciest that I have gone. And again, I don't necessarily hate any of these books. I've personally contributed to some of the discussion around some of these books. And I'm glad that these books have been successful for those authors. That's so great. But let's talk about anything else, please, for the next 6 months. Anything. Different books. Let's see what happens in the second half of this year. Let me know if there's a book that you think has been like way over talked about, whether or not for the positive or for the negative, that didn't come up in this. I am going to be trying to use my community tab a lot more this year to keep in touch and engage with you guys. So always keep your eye on that, like spontaneous random polls, etc. Opinion stuff like this. So keep an eye on the community tab. I will see you guys next time. Have a great day. Bye.